Hey everybody, Christine Lashley here. I'll share with you today the steps to create this 9 by 12 oil painting of an estate in Tuscany. Before we get started on the project, it's important to understand my point of view in making this painting. Because there are so many beautiful views in Tuscany, there's a tremendous amount of things to paint. The reason that I picked this scene was because I really wanted to focus in on the beautiful greenery and the sense of sun and shadow on the road and also the building. So after I clarified my point of inspiration and chose my image based on my trip's experience, then I set out to do some quick thumbnail studies to select which vantage point would be the best way to showcase my work. Composition and sketches and preliminary studies can be confusing to a beginner, but basically the idea when starting a painting is you want to select the main idea. For example, shadows, road, house, vista, or a wider view. In the case of my painting, I chose to focus in on the shadows and the dramatic vertical. That was my main idea. And my composition. I begin with a grid, which is kind of unusual for me when I'm starting my project. And basically what I'm doing is kind of using line and dot to pretty much transfer the image onto the panel. This is actually a really straightforward way to work. I usually just like to work a little more intuitively. Here you can see I'm measuring these intervals, and then I just put that green smudge in the middle to make sure my brain and students that are watching this understand that I have a building and then I have that greenery. I want to keep the vertical lines straight up and down. I don't want those tilting at all, so I can double check that. And I just start chunking in all of the shapes. It's kind of a version of a cube. The road going back into the distance often causes students a lot of trouble. So that is coming up next. And I want to just mass in some of the landscape first. So here you can see the zigzag line and then the raking shadows just coming across at that angle. Now I'm switching to full paint. No medium. This is just direct oil paint. I'm mixing everything together. I'm not cleaning my brush. I'm just using this idea of stacking color. So I have my blue, then I add a little more white. It gets a little bit gray, and this just helps me work with really full paint. I'll switch to like a number 4 brush for establishing those darks, the upright form of the trees. When I'm creating the painting, I have done some training in the idea of maintaining my light, medium, and dark masses. That's how I'm able to get cleaner brush marks and do things such as switch between the warm and the cool, for example, of these raking shadows coming onto the grass. Next up is the building, and I do want to establish that light. I felt like my first kind of peach pass was a little too bright, but here I'm relating that to the road and the terrace. The whole structure of this painting depends on this feeling of light and shadow. That was my main intent. So I do need to be aware of the shadows. They have a bluer cast. I do have a video on warm and cool shadows, and that could be helpful to just check out if you're not so familiar with color temperature shift. And again, going back to this idea of the trees are this really dark and rich kind of chocolate brown color. That's what's helping me mix the tree greens. Next up, we have a little bit of drama. I have kind of a chapter 2. This represents working on the painting not only for the previous 1-hour demo. Oh, right, and now I scrape it all down, just when you might have liked the first version. This is actually a great way to kind of abstract the painting and have it be more impressionistic. So next I just restate with bold brush marks the shadow form. I felt like everything was just getting too separated. So I'm abstracting, I'm unifying, and I'm restating. I'm also creating almost another painting on top of the previous one, but I would say this is an important, great way for just mentally not treating everything so precious in the painting. If you're afraid of your own painting as you create it, it just ends up having this tight look, and I don't think that viewers appreciate it necessarily as much. Some people might disagree with me on that note. However, I've just found that the more kind of carefree I am with creating my painting, in general, the more I like it after it's finished. And it actually becomes pretty fun to create it when there's kind of a curiosity or what if mentality as the artwork gets created. I also feel like this is similar to how one might experience a scene. The light might be there, then it goes away, time is passing, the shadows shift a little bit, so it just doesn't have like a frozen in time feeling. If I copy the photo too closely, this becomes a problem. That frozen feeling just seems to get magnified, and I really don't like it. To make sure I have this kind of open-ended, interpretive way of working, and here I am kind of speeding through some of the painting, but I will often work on more than one photo, or I do like to work with video. It's great if I can work on location, but that's just not always practical. I can't spend half the year in Tuscany as much as I might like to. And so I have to kind of interpret from my photos what I hope to extract from the scene, and also use my memory quite a bit. Just what did that feel like, and can I put away the reference and work from memory? Next up is working on carrying the viewer into the distance with a continuation of the light and shadow as it goes back onto the road, and finishing out the flower pots, which I first left out and then I decided I did want to add them. I liked the feel of these giant pots. I initially thought I shouldn't put them in and just keep it simple, but then I decided, hey, they're kind of a good design element, and it was very in keeping with Tuscany to have the lemon trees that were brought inside in the winter and then brought outside. Plus, I added some people on the terrace just for a sense of scale, and redid the shutters and the windows in the building. Because I did the scraping down, it also has that kind of rough texture of some of the buildings in Tuscany and the roads. So I did end up keeping a lot of that texture in the final painting. Overall, this represents 2 hours of work on the artwork. And even though this started out as a class demo, this is finished in my online lesson program as a full demo with narration of all the process. If you're interested in seeing a more full version of this with complete color mixing and additional reference, you can check out that tutorial in my program. I have some videos on YouTube where I have mixing green and other art tutorials that you might find interesting, so do check it out. I appreciate people being here on YouTube, and I do welcome any suggestions in the comments below. Let's review where we're at for this painting. I think a key element of the success of this painting is the abstracted texture from the scrape down. Plus, I really like the addition of the potted lemon trees in the beginning foreground portion. I think it also provides a sense of scale, but it helps the viewer to realize the full distance going from foreground, middle ground to background. And notice what else I did with the background. I kept that picture plane for the sky a little bit darker, and the far land mass is much bluer, and that has a bit of purple to it. So I think that those are two ways that I really transcended the photo reference and made a different type of painting than just copying the photo would be. I do get a lot of questions about people who want to be looser or more abstract, and I think that those are two takeaways that I didn't know when I was setting out to paint this, but upon review, this is what I feel is just a big takeaway from the lesson. A huge issue with making art that I see students try to overcome is this question of, is it right? Am I doing it right? And what happens when mistakes are made? And this fear of overcoming, making a bad move. Well, this is why I think that bad art can be good, because then you just care less, and I think it's more fun. Whenever I see students letting go and not worrying so much about the mechanics of the process, it just seems that the artwork is more successful, more paintings get created, and there's more excitement for the next project. I really encourage you to make a mess and make mistakes and scrape it down. Even if you disagree with me on one painting, I bet your next one will be even better because you weren't afraid to give it a go, make a mess, and have some fun.